Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings running back picks for week 4. Any discussion that we're going to have this week is going to have to start with the man who everybody's talking about, and that's Carlos Williams of the Buffalo Bills. Williams is only 3,400 and is likely to be getting the starting role with LaShawn McCoy very, very probably out. It's not 100% definite yet, but Rex Ryan basically said in an interview yesterday that he really doesn't expect McCoy to play, and they're moving forward, preparing with Williams as the starting running back. Now, Williams is only 3,400, which is dirt cheap for a guy who's going to be a starting running back going up against the New York Giants, who do not have a very good rush defense. Volume alone makes Williams somebody that you have to consider because he's going to see the lion's share of the carries. He also is going to see some of the red zone carries, which he basically has been seeing already. And the thing that I like about him is he's also very good catching the ball out of the backfield. It was one of the things that helped him get drafted in the first place. He was drafted basically as a third down back, but now he's going to be basically playing the featured back role. Now, you really only need about 12 to 15 points out of a guy like this at 3,400 in order for him to make good value. And that's basically a touchdown, 3 catches, and like 60 total yards overall. I expect him to do better than that on, maybe not multiple touchdowns, but definitely at least that many catches, if not more. And I think that he should blow well past the yardage amount that's there. So I do think that this is going to be a really good spot for a guy like Carlos Williams. And if you're not playing him or not using him at this price, I think you're going to have a really rough day because it's going to be tough to find somebody else at that cheap price that you're able to get that kind of an upside from. And by using a guy that cheap, it allows you to save money in order to spend up at all the other positions. I think Williams is almost a lock for most cash games this week, and I think he's going to be pretty popular in GPPs as well. And unlike some of the other guys who I say, he's popular, maybe we should fade him and try to get away from him. It's tough for me to say to fade this guy because he is so cheap that, if you fade him and he does even have just a decent game where he gets 15 to 18 fantasy points, you're basically going to have to find another cheap priced running back, at that $33,000, $3,800 range, somewhere in there, who's going to outscore him in order to outpace those rosters. And even if you do outpace those rosters, you still probably would have been better off with that other guy that you found and Carlos Williams, and then going and paying up at every other position for the studs that you really want, who you expect to have big games. Again, if you want to try to get away from him, I can understand that. It will help differentiate your roster in the tournament. I just think that his price and the volume that he's expected to get are too good that it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's not going to be something that you're going to feel good about doing. Next guy I want to talk about is Eddie Lacy, $6,900. And I know that people haven't had good experiences with Eddie Lacy so far this year, but remember, he's been banged up so far this entire season. This is the first week that he's practiced in full. He had a full practice on Wednesday, will practice in full on Thursday, practice in full on Friday. So it doesn't look like he's going to be splitting carries with James Starks anymore. Sure, Starks will still get a couple carries here and there, but Lacy's going to go back to being the lead back and getting the lion's share of the work. Green Bay is on the road at San Francisco, but they are favored, so they should have a lead, and we should see a lot of Lacy running out the clock late, as well as a chance for him to get some of those red zone carries. He gets a lot of red zone carries, so earlier in the game, and with him being, 100% healthy now, I don't expect Aaron Rodgers to just keep trying to pass the ball into the end zone from 5 or 6 yards out. Last year, they did a lot of pounding it with Lacy when they did get inside the 10, and I expect them to go back to that now that Lacy is healthy. Like I said, he's a red zone guy, so he should be good for a touchdown or two, and I think he could even get you 100 yards today. Think about him as well is he's kind of out of people's minds at this point, so I'm expecting to get very low ownership on him. And again, with them being favored, I think he's going to have a really big upside game today, and I don't think that 6,900 is too overly expensive for him because there are a lot of guys above him who aren't in good matchups or who aren't favored, who aren't in spots that you would expect them to do incredibly well in. And they're probably going to take a lot more of the action than a guy like Lacy is. So I think Lacy's going to be sneaky. I think he has big upside for you, and I think he's going to make for a very good play in week 4. Next guy I want to talk about is Latavius Murray. Again, I love this guy. I think he has a ton of talent. We mentioned him last week. Turned out to be one of the top scoring running backs, somebody that you definitely wanted to have on your rosters, and he worked out very well. He's favored this week and is going up against a weak Chicago run defense. He got 26 carries in week 3. So in games where they're ahead, they have no problem feeding this guy the ball. And he wound up with like 136 yards, a touchdown. I think he only had about one catch, which is low for him. He's actually caught 11 passes already on the year. He had 3 in the first game, 7 in the second game. He's an every down workhorse back. He has good hands, so he can catch passes out of the backfield. He's a big, strong, powerful guy, and he's got breakaway speed, which is another thing that I think people are underestimating about him. He hasn't had one of those 50, 60-yard touchdown runs that he's broken off yet, but I think it is coming because he does have that kind of speed. Again, he's shifty. He can make some moves in the open field. He's like 6'2", 230, so he's a big, strong, powerful guy. When he runs, he can run over defensive backs. So if he gets past that first level and gets through those linebackers, there aren't many DBs or even safeties that are going to be able to take him down one-on-one. So I definitely like Murray today. His price has come up a little bit at 6,300, which I'm not thrilled with, but I do still expect him to get me 20 to 25 points, fantasy points this weekend, and that's a very useful number to get out of a guy who, you're getting in that mid-tier at the running back value range. Next guy I want to talk about is Devonta Freeman. If there's no Tevin Coleman again this week, he's favored at home in a game with a high over-under at 47. He has 52 carries and 12 catches already on the season. Now, remember, he's really only been the main guy for about 6 quarters right now. Tevin Coleman had 20 carries in the first game. He had 9 in the second game before he went out and, gave way to Devonta Freeman. So Freeman getting 20 touches today is basically almost a lock as long as they don't get into a game where they get down. And even if they do get into a game where they get down, if Tevin Coleman's out, they don't have a lot of depth at the running back position. And this is a guy who is basically game script proof already in his young career, in my opinion. And the reason for that is not only is he a good runner, but he's also a very good pass catcher out of the backfield. So even if they are down, it's not like he's going to be on the sidelines while they bring somebody else in to do the pass catching. If they're down, he's still going to get a couple carries, and he's also going to be in there on all those passing situations. So he'll be able to rack up some catches and get you some points that way. He's only 5,200, which is still not all that cheap. Which is still not all that expensive. And he's going to get 20 to 25 touches probably. 20 to 25 touches at 5,200. That's a really good value, and I would have no problem spending to get that done. The last guy I want to talk about is going to be Melvin Gordon. Now, I know that people don't like using Melvin Gordon. I know that he's been vultured in the red zone. I know that he's been splitting, the third down work and everything like that. But he's going up against the Cleveland run defense here. He's only 4,900. His team is favored. And Cleveland has already given up some huge games on the ground to guys like Chris Ivory. Latavius Murray last week had a huge game on the ground against them. So you can definitely run against this team. I don't think it's something that's going to be very tough to do. Gordon did disappoint in week 3 at high ownership, but that's another thing that I like about him because it's going to push people off of him and keep that ownership level down for him when he has his breakout game eventually. In week 2, he railed off like 3 20-plus yard runs. And against this weak Cleveland defense, I think he can do that as well. Now, you may need him to do that in order to get a touchdown because, like I said, they have been using Danny Woodhead in the red zone. But I think that might change eventually. I think they were using Danny Woodhead in the red zone mostly because the coaches had more faith in him with, Gordon being a new kid. They didn't want to give him all the responsibility right away. But I do think they want to get him on track, and I do expect to see him in the red zone in some situations this game. He's been getting in there a little bit more on some of those downs, although so far they basically only used him as a decoy running the ball. But eventually, if you want those decoys to keep working, you got to actually give him the ball and let him get some carries. Otherwise, the defenses aren't going to respect it, and they know you're going to pass. So I do think that Melvin Gordon's in a pretty good spot this week. I think his price is pretty cheap at $4,900. I think you're going to have high ownership on him still, though, because I do hear a lot of people talking about him. But I think there are enough people that'll stay away that it'll still give you some upside for a tournament. Excuse me. There's a couple other value guys that might open up that I just wanted to mention. If DeMarco Murray is out again, you got to take a look at Ryan Matthews and Darren Sproles. Both guys had big games last weekend, and if they're taking over for Murray, I think you got to, at the very least look their way because they're both going to get increased carries, increased touches, whether that be passing or however they decide to get the ball into their hands. I think both of those guys could have a decent game. And the other guy that I have my eye on right now is Thomas Rawls from Seattle. If there's no Marshawn Lynch, Rawls is going to be the guy who picks up most of the work. I know everybody was talking about Fred Jackson last week, but basically news coming out of Seattle this week is that they really like Rawls. That's actually the reason why they had no problem trading Christian Michael, because they really like this kid and think he has some upside. So if Marshawn Lynch is out, I do expect Rawls to have a big role in this offense this week. They're at home. They're favored. They should be winning. He should be running it out late. And I would expect him to have a pretty good game if that is the situation. So that's going to wrap it up for our DraftKings running back picks for week 4. Thank you for joining us here at RotoCurve. And as always, stay classy, DFS.